Father Urbain Grandier didn't believe in demons, until the day a convent full of screaming nuns accused him of seducing them without ever touching a single one. That single accusation ignited one of the most shocking and forbidden scandals in religious history, a story where faith, fear, and desire collided in a blaze of obsession that would haunt the world for centuries. In 1634, the French town of Loudun was an ordinary place, a quiet collection of stone streets and church bells, until a scandal began that would grip all of Europe. It started inside the Ursuline convent, where a group of nuns claimed they were being visited by something dark. They said unseen hands touched them at night, that voices whispered indecent things in their ears, and that a powerful man in the town had cursed them. Within weeks, the convent became a theater of hysteria. The nuns screamed, contorted their bodies, and confessed to being driven into sinful thoughts by invisible demons. The townspeople gathered outside the gates, both horrified and fascinated by what they heard. At the center of their accusations stood Father Urbain Grandier. He was everything a priest was not supposed to be: charming, intelligent, outspoken, and known to have admirers among the women of Loudun. His sermons were fiery, often critical of the church's hypocrisy and its obsession with control. Many envied his confidence. Others despised it. When the nuns accused him of witchcraft, few came to his defense. For his enemies, it was the perfect excuse to destroy him. The church sent investigators who arrived with holy water, relics, and an eagerness to prove the devil's hand in Loudun. Exorcisms were performed in public. The afflicted nuns writhed and shouted obscene things during the rituals, describing vivid, almost erotic encounters with spirits. The priests conducting the ceremonies declared these as signs of possession. The more extreme the behavior, the more convinced everyone became that evil had taken root in the convent. The events blurred the line between sacred ritual and spectacle. Nobles traveled from across France just to watch. It was faith as entertainment and fear as proof of holiness. Behind the scenes, however, the story grew even darker. Letters later revealed that political figures had used the accusations to remove Grandier, who had openly opposed Cardinal Richelieu's authority. The exorcisms became not only a tool of purification but of punishment. Each convulsion, each scream, each confession from a nun added weight to the case against him. He was arrested, tortured into signing confessions he denied, and sentenced to death by fire. The flames that consumed him were described as the cleansing of Loudun, but to many it was clear that the true evil came not from the devil, but from human ambition. After Grandier's death, the possession stopped almost overnight. Yet the story refused to fade. Over the years, writers, historians, and even psychiatrists would return to Loudun, trying to untangle what had really happened. Some believed mass hysteria fueled by repression. Others saw a social explosion caused by guilt and desire. The exorcisms, they said, had been a mirror reflecting what the church feared most: the uncontrolled body, the forbidden impulse, and the seductive power of belief itself. What was called holy justice had been, at its core, a ritual of obsession and destruction disguised as salvation. By the mid-1800s, Europe had entered an age of discovery, yet the mysteries of the human mind were still tangled with superstition. Doctors, priests, and scientists gathered in dim laboratories and candlelit chapels, convinced that sin and sickness could be cured by understanding the connection between the soul and the body. The church had long treated exorcism as a sacred duty, but now it was blending with medicine, forming a strange partnership that blurred the line between healing and control. Women, in particular, became the focus of this new fascination. They were seen as fragile, emotional, and dangerously susceptible to temptation. When they suffered fits, hallucinations, or uncontrollable urges, priests called it possession, while doctors labeled it hysteria. In both cases, the cure looked disturbingly similar. Patients were restrained on wooden beds, surrounded by crosses, medical instruments, and curious observers. Some priests prayed fervently, while others experimented with physical methods. Holy oils were applied to the forehead, the chest, and sometimes to more intimate parts of the body, as they claimed the demons clung to the flesh. The women cried out, trembling under the weight of ritual and fear. To those conducting the ceremonies, this was proof of the devil's resistance, a sign that the exorcism was working. To the victims, it was humiliation disguised as redemption. They were told that their suffering would save them, that their pain was sacred. Few dared to question it. The obsession with curing female desire spread beyond the church. Hospitals and clinics began their own experiments, replacing prayers with electric devices and hypnosis, yet the logic remained the same. The body was to blame, and it had to be subdued. Some doctors wrote about their patients in clinical journals, describing their erotic convulsions and holy raptures with unsettling detachment. Others used these studies to justify their own curiosities, claiming they were observing the mechanics of possession. The boundary between science and sin melted away, leaving a legacy of exploitation masked as enlightenment. In the grand salons of Paris and Vienna, the topic became fashionable. Artists painted women in states of religious ecstasy, their faces tilted upward, their expressions a mixture of agony and pleasure. Writers romanticized the possessed woman as both victim and temptress, trapped between heaven and hell. The church did little to stop this trend. It quietly benefited from the attention. Each story reinforced its power over the invisible world, keeping the faithful afraid of what might happen if desire went unchecked. Behind the public fascination, countless lives were ruined. Women who failed to recover were locked away in asylums, labeled incurable or damned. Those who survived were often broken in spirit, unable to distinguish faith from violation. The experiments and rituals continued for decades, recorded in dusty archives under the guise of theology and medicine. What they revealed was not the triumph of faith or science, but a chilling truth. Exorcisms had become a reflection of society as fear of the body itself. In their desperate attempt to cast out demons, they only succeeded in creating new ones, born not from hell, but from human hands. In the early decades of the 20th century, Europe was rebuilding itself after war, and science was advancing faster than ever before. Electricity, anesthesia, and psychology had transformed medicine, but a few men still clung to stranger beliefs. Among them was Dr. Karl Lenz, a German physician who called himself a surgeon of the soul. He had studied both neurology and theology, convinced that human suffering was not only physical, but spiritual in nature. According to him, sin and illness were two sides of the same infection, and his life's mission was to extract the invisible parasite he believed was hiding inside the human spine. Lenz opened a private clinic on the outskirts of Berlin in 1919. His patients were mostly the wealthy and the desperate, people who had tried every modern cure but still claimed to hear voices or feel unclean urges. Lenz promised to heal them through what he called psychic excision. The procedure involved sedating the patient, drawing a chalk cross down their back, and making small incisions along the vertebrae. He would then press his fingers against the open flesh, murmuring Latin prayers while describing how the evil energy was being released. Assistants reported that he collected drops of blood and small tissue samples, storing them in jars labeled with sins such as lust, wrath, and despair. At first, his results seemed miraculous. Patients reported vivid sensations during recovery, flashes of light, burning heat, or overwhelming waves of relief. Some claimed to feel reborn, while others described moments of strange euphoria that bordered on pleasure. Lenz presented these experiences as proof that he had found the physical seat of the soul. Newspapers called him the Doctor of Demons, and spiritualists celebrated his blend of science and sanctity. Yet behind the praise, rumors spread about what really happened inside his clinic. Nurses whispered of late-night sessions with no witnesses, where Lentz operated without anesthesia and spoke to his patients as if addressing another being inside them. Some said he filmed the procedures using early motion picture cameras, creating reels that mixed surgery with ritual. When asked about the films, he claimed they were for medical study, but the content was too disturbing for public viewing. It was said that during one experiment, a patient died on the table and Lentz refused to stop operating, insisting that the demon was still inside. By 1927, complaints reached the authorities. Police raided his clinic, uncovering dozens of preserved organs floating in formaldehyde, each labeled with the patient's name and the sin supposedly removed. The discovery shocked the country. Before Lentz could be arrested, he vanished without a trace. Some believed he escaped to Argentina using forged papers. Others thought he was murdered by one of his victims' families. A few of his assistants claimed he performed one final operation on himself. In his locked office, they found blood-stained instruments and a note that read only, "The body resists what the soul remembers." Whether he died or disappeared, no one ever saw him again, but the legend of the Devil's Doctor continued to haunt medical journals and whispered stories for generations. By the 1970s, the world had learned to fear the unseen again. The church, which had grown quieter about possession during the scientific century, found new life in the shadow of cinema. When a certain film about a young girl and a demon swept through theaters, people once more believed that evil could crawl inside the human body. Across Europe and the Americas, priests began receiving desperate letters from families convinced that their loved ones were possessed. The Vatican, overwhelmed by demand, quietly reassembled a department that had not officially existed for decades, the Office of Exorcism. Its mission was to separate true possession from mental illness, but its records showed how easily the two blurred. Within this secret network, old manuals were copied and distributed to trusted priests. These texts detailed not only prayers but methods of restraint, deprivation, and purification. The rituals grew harsher, more secretive. Some required the subject to fast for days, others to remain bound and isolated. The logic was simple: weaken the body so the spirit could fight. What began as faith soon turned into something close to psychological warfare. Victims screamed for hours, their voices echoing through stone chapels and damp basements, while the priests recited Latin verses that few understood anymore. Reports of these exorcisms began leaking out through journalists and doctors. One case stood out: a young woman from Italy, known only as Maria, who was said to have undergone more than 60 sessions. During her final exorcism, witnesses claimed she experienced what they called divine ecstasy, her body trembling as though caught between agony and rapture. The priest overseeing her treatment insisted it was the demon mocking purity, but others suspected something far more human had occurred. Church officials intervened quickly, silencing witnesses and transferring the priest to a remote monastery. In internal documents, the event was dismissed as a misunderstanding of spiritual intensity. Years later, when copies of those documents surfaced, they revealed disturbing details. The notes described how physical punishment was sometimes used to expose temptation and break the will of the corrupted flesh. Victims were told that their suffering was proof of faith, that humiliation brought them closer to God. Behind the closed doors of confession, these acts became tools of obedience. The church called it spiritual warfare. Survivors called it torment. As word spread, skeptics accused the institution of using possession as a mask for abuse. The Vatican responded by tightening control, making exorcism an officially sanctioned rite again, but requiring permission from high-ranking clergy. Publicly, it claimed to modernize the practice. Privately, it kept the files sealed, hiding names, dates, and causes of death. Investigators who gained access to fragments of those records found disturbing patterns. Young women, long sessions, repeated mentions of sensual manifestation. By the end of the decade, belief in demons had become both a religious revival and a form of entertainment. Television talk shows invited exorcists to speak about their battles with evil, while magazines printed photographs of sweating priests holding crucifixes over thrashing bodies. What no one saw were the quiet rooms afterward, where victims lay exhausted, trembling, sometimes unrecognizable. Behind every story of salvation was a body marked by fear, a reminder that even holiness could become a performance. The church maintained its silence. The faithful clung to their hope, and the hidden files remained locked away, waiting for someone brave enough to open them again. In the 21st century, exorcism no longer hides in the shadows of monasteries or small villages. It has migrated onto glowing screens, where the line between religion and entertainment is thinner than ever. Self-proclaimed demonologists broadcast live rituals on streaming platforms, promising to cast out spirits through video calls and digital prayer sessions. Some use microphones and ring lights instead of incense and holy water, their voices rising and trembling as viewers watch from around the world. What was once a forbidden act performed in secrecy has become a spectacle, a ritual rebranded for clicks and followers. Audiences tune in not just out of fear but out of fascination, drawn to the same mix of horror and desire that has followed exorcism for centuries. These modern exorcists sell more than faith. They offer subscription packages, private cleansing appointments, and merchandise adorned with symbols of power. Many claim to heal addiction, lust, and spiritual corruption through the screen. In chat rooms, followers confess their sins in real time, begging to be delivered. The language of salvation has become a business model. Some sessions last hours filled with screaming, convulsions, and trembling voices that echo through computer speakers. Others are quiet, almost intimate, as the exorcist whispers prayers meant to purify the viewer's soul. The audience cannot look away. The ritual blend of pain and release still holds the same hypnotic pull it did centuries ago. Psychologists warn that what viewers are witnessing is not spiritual warfare, but emotional manipulation. The participants often suffer from deep loneliness, trauma, or guilt, and the exorcists give their suffering a name they can understand. The demons are metaphors turned into monsters, allowing people to fight what they cannot explain. Yet the act itself, repeated and broadcast endlessly, turns personal anguish into performance. Each possession becomes content, each deliverance, a form of entertainment. Religious institutions have tried to respond. Some churches denounce online exorcisms as dangerous distortions, while others cautiously endorse them to maintain relevance. The Vatican occasionally issues statements reminding believers that true exorcism requires discipline and permission, but the warnings are drowned out by the noise of social media. There are now conferences where exorcists teach branding, lighting, and audience engagement, claiming these tools help spread the word. Faith has adapted to the algorithm. Despite the skepticism, the number of people seeking exorcisms continues to rise. In an age of endless connection, isolation has grown deeper, and people search for meaning in places that promise immediate relief. The demons may have changed their shape. They no longer appear in mirrors or dark corners, but in the endless scrolling of digital life. Possession has become a metaphor for obsession, addiction, and control, yet it still carries the same emotional truth that haunted the past. The story of exorcism, from burning stakes to broadband signals, reveals a cycle that never ends. Humanity continues to battle invisible forces, calling them by different names across time: sin, sickness, energy, temptation. The rituals may evolve, but their purpose remains unchanged: to make sense of the chaos within. What began as a sacred war against the devil has turned into a mirror for modern desire, a reminder that belief, fear, and fascination have always been intertwined.